waiting for. The town assessor, Matt Sturgis, is going to be giving us an explanation of how the new tax valuation works, the process, and a detailed accounting of how all the work that went into it, and obviously an explanation of how, if people have concerns about their assessment, the process involved in coming in and sitting down with Matt and his staff and talking about it. So with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Matt Sturgis, the town assessor. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here's your package as well. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for the welcome. I'm going to be the operator of my PowerPoint presentation this evening. Hopefully it will bring some clarity to what I've pretty much dedicated myself to for the better part of, well, approximately 18 months and 12 months officially. So it's been fairly consuming, but an extremely worthwhile process. I hope by the end of tonight you'll see some of the results, and it'll help you feel a little bit more comfortable and significantly more informed as to the process. This is my start of my presentation. First of all, the last time Cape Elizabeth performed a revaluation was in 1994, and that was performed in-house by staff. At the time, the assessor was Gerald Daigle. And since then, it's been 9 robust years, some of them lean, but some of them extremely active, and we've tried to keep all that in perspective and track some of those sales, and it led us to working towards the goal of completing the 2003 revaluation. We started out this project with 2 primary goals, and the first and foremost being the equalization of the tax burden, and the second being to maintain compliance with Maine law and real estate laws related to property taxation statutes. Those being, and primarily, one of the primary portions of the Maine Constitution is that all taxes upon real and personal property shall be apportioned and assessed equally according to the just value. And that's really where the equalization portion comes in. That meaning with just value that we need to assess properties at their full market value. And there are 2 statutory requirements that exist that we must comply with, and we're currently out of context, out of line with, and that was that minimum assessment ratio of 70%, meaning that the price of property or the assessment of a property in relationship to its sale price or market value should not be below, on the average, of 70% overall. And the quality rating, which is primarily for those of you wanting to remember or trying to forget your statistics class, is the coefficient of dispersion, which ultimately gives us the idea as far as the relative equity of the assessments, and that not needing to be above 20%. Easiest way to try to give you an understanding of these 2 concepts is an assessment ratio you can have of 100%, but a quality rating of 50. If you had the example of 100 sales or 100 properties, 50 of them selling for 150,000, 50 of them selling for 50,000, and all of them having an assessed value of 100,000. Well, the ratio would be 100% because your average would be that 100,000. However, your quality rating would be 50 because you'd be deviating 50 points from your real average. So 50% of the people would be overassessed while 50% would be underassessed. And that's kind of my attempt at a bare bones explanation of what a quality rating is. Now, some important points that I think I'd like us all to remember, and you may find this useful in speaking with citizens in town and property owners in town, is that a revaluation, first and foremost, does not raise new revenue for the town. And the purpose behind this is to value all properties by the same standard, and that being their just value. And that, again, the just value as defined by law is the same as a fair market value. Keeping in mind at all times that price does not always equate to market value. I think one idea we can keep in mind thinking about that price isn't related to market value a lot of times is the current market that we've seen in the past year, where you have multiple bids for one property, where they bid the property up and up and up, and many times it does actually transfer at above the real market value or what the appraised value is. But you had a bidding war between competing interests, and they bid the property up above and beyond where it, in normal conditions, would transfer for. So I try to keep that in my own mind and in consideration. Expanding on that concept, perhaps, thinking about market value in regards to actual selling price. Market value is actually defined as the most probable selling price negotiated between knowledgeable and willing buyers and sellers, both typically motivated and acting in their own best self-interest. And the terms are in terms of cash or the equivalent thereof. Now, keeping that in mind, one way that folks can understand market value is think about going to an auto dealership where you have 6 cars perhaps on the same lot, or 6 Ford Tauruses, for instance, with the asking price for them being $20,000 for each. Now, over time, 3 of those cars sell, one selling for $19,000, the other second selling for $18,500, and the third selling for $17,700. Well, their asking price may be $20,000, but the average selling price is $18,400. And so you look at that and say, well, now I can take that application and apply it to properties and say, well, the average is about $18,400, so comparable cars, or in this case, in our instance, comparable properties would be worth at $18,400. And that gives us an idea as to the overall picture of the market as opposed to what folks may be asking for them. A lot of times folks look at what I do for work and say, well, Mr. Smith up the street is asking X amount of dollars for his property, and now it's assessed at some portion thereof of the full value of it. Well, that all works out well and good, but I can't chase listings, for instance, and it's really not a workable number to me until there's finally a closed sales and 2 people have agreed, I'll take your money and you'll give me yours, type of thing, and that's how it makes it relevant to my analysis. I can work on, so folks can really ask whatever they want, but until it's actually all said and done, then I really can't use a lot of that information. Now, I've talked about this a couple times in the past, and this is the current relationship of the assessed values in Cape Elizabeth overall to their market values, and these are all based on from properties that have sold in town within the past actually that's since from 1994 to 2002. Now, 1994 being the nexus point from when we did the last evaluation, and you can see actually there was a little bit of a slower time period. The market was a little sluggish between 94 and 97, and then at that point the market started to respond a little bit better. There was more activity, and price appreciation was beginning to take hold in the local market. From 94 to 95, it actually the ratio went up a little bit, and that meaning that the assessed values were closer to what the properties were transferring for, as well as in 96. But then from there, as you can see quite evidently, it's a precipitous slide all the way down to the current market of 2002 through December of 2002 at 59%, which pretty much leads us to this evening and the reason why we are here. That's an average. That takes in, say for instance, last year there were 400 transfers. Of those, perhaps 100 of those were arm's length transactions, and there are a number of properties that may be close to it. Some may be close to 90% of their market value, while others may be at a third. So overall, you take all those sales and their assessments, kind of average them, and then gives you the overall picture from that way.
Contacts for the rest of the state or global, other global communities like Charlotte?
Oh, sure. For towns like, well, for many of the surrounding communities, I think they've seen similar appreciation. I think Cape Elizabeth has seen probably a more robust market. I think we've made out a little bit better. I think the demand here is quite high, or has, through analyzation of the sales, has been quite high. In this project, I actually employed 3 years worth of sales from 2000, 2001, and 2002, which is approximately 460 properties that sold during that time period, real arm's length transactions, of which we have about 3,500 properties in town that are actually single-family residences developed. And then you take into consideration there a number of properties that either probably won't sell for quite some time, long-time family holdings, or other properties that have been transferred within families, and that reduces that number even more. So now you're looking at not about, probably close to like 18 to 20% of the properties that actually have a viability or could be put onto the market have transferred during that time period, which is a significant portion of the town when you think about it. And a lot of folks actually, they're within town movements where they've moved from one neighborhood to another. Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry, I will. Sorry, yeah, I apologize. I'll keep that in mind. Let's see. And then this is also the quality rating that we've seen from the last evaluation. Now, the closer you get to zero, obviously, the less deviation there is from the median or from the middle of the sample. But if you can get between perhaps like 5 and 10, that's really quite a good mark for the town. We're hovering around 10 for quite some time, between 10 and 12, which doesn't work out too bad. But as you can see, since '98, we've slowly been inching our way upward towards 16, and it starts to tell me that, yeah, we have pockets where folks are significantly underassessed, while there are others who are probably picking up more than their fair share of the overall tax burden. And that it's kind of interesting because that is the converse of the ratio chart that we had previously. It actually, as the ratio goes down, the quality rating starts to increase. So they kind of work opposite, but at the same time indicate the same thing. Now, from 1994 to 2002, I performed an analysis of the average and the median sale prices of properties that have transferred in town. Now, I employed both because most folks are comfortable thinking about average sale price. You say, well, if you took those 400 plus sales that took place over this time period, what was the average? Well, the average sometimes can get skewed by your peaks and your valleys, and they offset each other fairly well over time. You figure, so you can chart and get a fairly rational concept of the market. However, the median really gives you an idea about what the dead center of that is really indicating. So that would be closer to the majority of all the properties that transferred. Now, over that time period, there was approximately 9.7% annual appreciation that tracks over that time period. Now, meaning that in 1994, the average sale price was $150,500 more or less, and the median was $138,250. And then, if you recall on the previous chart, where the ratio kind of inched up to 95 and 96% back in 95, 96, and 97. Well, that's at the same time that the median sale price actually dropped down a little bit. And then from there, it started to work its way up steadily. So that same property today that sold back in 94 for $138,250, by the model and by analyzation of the sales, that same home today all things being considered, would now be worth approximately, or did to actually sell for approximately $285,000. And that's what 9.7% growth over that time period does for you. The next chart, I think, will show it a little bit more accurately as to how peaks and valleys work to give you an average that results in such robust growth. But this is actually that same time period with the average sale price and the percentage appreciation or depreciation that you can see from 94 to 95, and how it steadily worked its way up from 95. But last year was our spike market. I think a lot of us are familiar with seeing the way, signs would go up and come down within a day, if a sign even got up to sell a home, as well as, properties never even making it to that point of word of mouth, and bang, it was gone, or folks would be buying properties left and right, and we were getting more volume as far as properties that did transfer last year than we did in 2001, and it reflected, and I wasn't surprised when the number came in at a 35.7% increase in from 2001 to 2002, the average sale price appreciation in 1 year. But then you say, so you look at that and you say, well, that if anything, that indicates to me that there is a spike market, and that's kind of why I looked at the 2000, 2001, and 2002 sales, because I felt they were a little bit more, I guess, representative of what over time we would use as the overall numbers as to where we should be going, as opposed to saying, well, yeah, the sky's the limit from here. I think another segment of investment ran into a similar problem, and I myself am a little too conservative to try to hang my hat on that high water mark. So that's why I used 3 years worth of sales to try to find a more rational number.
Could you explain, so that I understand, why the dip to the minus 9.3?
Councillor Carson asked why there was the depreciation, so to speak, in 1990 from 94 to 95. Analyzation of the sale prices, when you looked earlier on that one chart that showed the average sale price went from, I think, 138 down to about 120 or 118, I think it was. Now that was the average and the median for that year, and that's just how that worked out. I think at the time we were just looking at perhaps a slow market, and there may have been more at that time, more supply than there was demand in the market. A simple function of that concept, which was it surprised me. But then when you look at the overall picture and the overall time period, then you pick up your peaks and your valleys, and they give you an overall trend, so you can find something that's a little more rational. Now the question that we all wonder is, what is the effect of revaluation on taxes, and what is the effect of this revaluation on property taxes in town here in Cape Elizabeth? Well, ultimately it boils down to taxpayers whose current value is below 59% of the market value. They were looking at a tax increase. Taxpayers whose current valuation is 59% of market value will see no change, and those whose current valuation is above 59% of market value will be looking at a tax decrease. Later in my presentation, I actually have some numbers and a chart that breaks down exactly the numbers and the percentages of what we have for decreases, and so I'll expand upon that in a little while. Now, I also, to try to give you all a better picture as to, or a feeling as to all the different sales I did consider, I grabbed some representative sales that have taken place, and I have their photographs in there, and I'll show them here in this presentation. Just kind of gives you an idea as to what properties sold for, when they sold, when there may have been actually more than one transfer, and the ratios or the relationship between that sale or the assessed value and the sale price of that property. And these are all pretty much from different segments of Cape Elizabeth, or sections of Cape Elizabeth waterfront, different residential neighborhoods, as well as different sections of town, so it kind of give you a broad idea of the whole market that I had to look at, reflecting that I did look at approximately just over 450 sales and tried to find some rhyme and reason between the actions of property buyers in town. The first one that I have is Shore Road, a home that transferred. It was a non-waterfront sale, or non-waterfront property that has some winter views. It's approximately 1,225 square feet of living area on a 12,200 more or less square foot lot. Now this property was assessed at 172.6. You see where it says assessed in 1994. That's because the assessed value hadn't changed since the last revaluation. There haven't been any additions or subtractions to the property or any other reasons for us to go visit and increase the value of the property. Now, the information that would lead us to go and perhaps increase a property would be if the owner got a building permit, or primarily that's what drives us to get out there. Or if they don't get a building permit and we happen to see that there's a deck where there was not one before and they didn't get a permit, we still try to grab that when it comes along. No, it never happens. That property sold last January for $270,000 more or less. Then it sold again in May for $311,500, and then 2 months later for $340,000. Each time the ratio, as you can see, slipping from 63% to 55% to 51%. And each time I thought, well, I guess after the second transfer, I thought that maybe I was getting a corrective deed, then realized that, no, the property was a multiple transfer. And so that was kind of an eye-opener to see a really active market. And you can see now why we have a 35% spike in that year, 2002, when things like that take place. Now here's another home that's over on Ocean View Road that transferred. It's an 1,800 more or less square foot home on a 8,300 square foot lot. It was originally assessed at $136,500 and then sold twice within the past 4 years at $155,000 and then $283,000. And the ratios at that time in '99, that reflects kind of where the whole town was. And then 2001, it's a little bit above what the average was at that time, so it gave me an idea for that overall neighborhood, what we were looking at. This property here is in Delano Park, or shall we say was. This was a 1,934 square foot home that has now been demolished and on a just under an acre sized lot. It was assessed at $405,600 with the home included in that assessment, and it sold for $1,150,000. And it was torn down with plans to construct a new home. And it's primarily right on the water. There is some discussion that I've heard, and taking into mind in Delano Park, there is a piece of land that sits between the homes that are there. There's some common land that sits between the homes and the waterfront. However, for all intents and purposes, this is waterfront property. Just don't have it's lacking maybe 1 or 2 points, but it obviously wasn't a detriment to the sale price. That, for all intents and purposes, though, that is a site sale. When a property owner buys a property and tears it down, and I, at that point, can use the sale price of that property plus the cost of demolition to give you an idea as to what the value of the land is. And it lets you know that the old adage of location, location, location is what it is about real estate really kind of comes to play. This property here is just around the bend on Shore Road. It sold just this past November for $675,000 and had an assessment of $246,300. It has water views, but it is not a waterfront property. It's just around the bend on Shore Road. Yep, just down the corner here. And but that's what you would call, or what I probably refer to as a one-back lot, where it's just one site removed from the water. Yeah, exactly, across from Todd Road. This is the property that was of some acclaim last year, made the paper, and was at that time the highest sale price property in the town of Cape Elizabeth. It's right on the water. It was assessed at $1,845,000 on a just under 3.5 acre size lot, and it's a 7,454 square foot home, and it sold for $3.5 million, which gives us a ratio of 52%, when in consideration of waterfront properties in town actually isn't in too bad a shape, where a lot of the other properties sold for, well, the ratios were approximately between 30 and 35%. So yes, and an indoor pool. This property is located down on the Reef Road, and this sold last summer in August for $1.2 million, and it's a little bit more reflective as to what has actually been taking place with the overall relationship with the assessed values to sale prices with a 39% ratio. It's a 2,800 square foot home on just under an acre lot. Ends up indicating a land value of just under, when you extract the building value from that, of just around $900,000, $850,000 to $900,000 for the site. Here's one down on Hunts Point that's seen some significant renovation, approximately just over or just under 100% probably overall renovation. It sold for $1,500,000 and was assessed at $707,900. It's on a double lot down at the end of Hunts Point, and I think that, you know, with the renovation, you're looking at a significant amount of that value, what it transferred for, being definitely tied to the site. It is a fantastic water location. This is a property that transferred right over here in Brentwood West, and I've put in some of these sales here to give you an idea as to some of the properties that actually were carrying a disproportionate share of the burden. And this is an example of a property that actually will be seeing its taxes go down over in the Brentwood neighborhood. It's just under 2,200 square feet of living area. It was assessed at $204,800, and it sold just last February for $230,000. This is another home that was on the Southwell Road, and this is probably a little bit closer to the overall picture of the majority of our homes in town as far as its relationship to market value. There's 1,596 square feet of living area, and at $133,200 for its assessed value, and it transferred at $186,900. You're looking at a 71% ratio. Sorry for not including that in there, but that's a little bit closer to the overall picture of a lot of our residential neighborhoods, or inland, residential neighborhoods. And here's a property over on Manor Way that is approximately 3,500 square feet on 6.4 acres. And again, this property is probably equal to one of those types that will probably see its taxes go down as well. Where it sold for $342,700, it was assessed at $490,000 with a 70% ratio. And another home in Stonegate. This was a just under 4,900 square foot home on just over an acre that sold for $750,000 with a $471,600 assessment. I'm sorry, Ms. Gatta. Okay. Will result in their property taxes most likely going down. Nope, that's taking into account the current budget. If you take, all my calculations that I have done are based on the most recent numbers for the town budget of, well, as of I think Monday, I think. Yeah. Or when I get the last the memo that you all received with your package. So those are the numbers that I worked on. Sure. So what all the considerations when I do look at that and when I make predictions or these statements are based on the most recent budget numbers that I've had at the start of this week. Sure. Thanks for asking the question. Here's a brand new house in Cross Hill, or approximately think actually a 2-year-old home. That's 4,500 square feet. This is an interesting situation because a lot of times new homes carry more of the burden because they do not have, or we have them closer to actual costs at the time that they're constructed, and their sites are usually closer to what their full value is. And for instance, in this property, we've got an assessed value of $457,800 with a sale price of $589,000. And when you think about that, I mean, these are all significant numbers, but the ratio of that is 78%, and that will probably result, I think I was about $30,000 light on the land value from last year to this year. I think I probably had that site at approximately about $60,000, and it's now going to be going up to between $90,000 and $100,000. So a big part of that gap is closed by the correction of the lot values using a 94 schedule to using a 2003 schedule. It's actually, what we do is look at I've used the footprint of the property and the finished area. So if it was, for instance, that property, there would be a 2-story home with, I believe it has finished area above the garage. So all that net residential living area would be included. But if there was finished basement area, that's not included. So it's everything above grade living area, and not the garage area. That would be something else. I'd price that differently. And here's a home located down in the Broad Cove neighborhood, just under 2,200 square feet, assessed for $232,000 and sold for $332,900. I've been through that home, and actually just after it transferred, and found it to be, there was nothing that the record had missed at the time. So it wasn't a question of a bunch of work being done that we didn't know about. It was really just appreciation in the market. And it's good by going through all these and reviewing every one of the sales that took place that we've used in this, or that I've used in this analysis. I have a comfort level and kind of an understanding as to why folks may have paid what they had and what my thoughts may be on that. Now, this is where we get down to where I made the understanding as to where a property may have a reduction in taxes, and that's based on the budget numbers that I received on Monday, with what our original assessed value would be if we hadn't gone through with the revaluation equalization program, looking at approximately about a $763 million value, assessed value for the community, which when you divide the budget that I received by that value, you end up with a $23.30 tax rate. In contrast to that, now with the new estimated value of the town that we'll probably go to commitment with when I go to commitment in August of approximately $1.25 billion, we're looking at now a mill rate of $14.20. But that's about a 59% increase overall in value.
That's a direct, that won't gain us any revenue.
No, that's a straight mathematical function right there. It's a lot of times when I did go through properties and speak with folks this summer, the biggest concern they had was, gee, you're going to bring my property up to full value, and the tax rate is inching in towards $23. If you assess me for what I'm worth, and that mill rate's there, you're going to kill me. And I ran into that a lot, and every time I get into a home, I took that as an opportunity to tell folks, the tax rate is going to go down. We're not doing this, one person asked me, what's the town going to do with all this new revenue? And that's when I said, no, that's really not the case. It's really just making sure we're treating this equitably, and this right here kind of shows you the exact relationship as to when you increase that bottom number. Now, all of a sudden, the result of that math is a much lower tax rate. The values increase, so that's where it offsets one another on many properties. Now, that's the 17,776. That's the budget numbers that I received at the start of the week. Compared to the total value, divided the amount of the budget The net to be raised by taxes divided by the assessed value of the community results in the tax rate.
Actually, now, the finance committee recommendation, $75,000 less than that, but for demonstration purposes, I think, it's important to look at what's actually rather than.
I'll, like I say, at this point in time, it's our best good faith estimate that we can come forward with. And then in August, after we go through hearings and reviews subsequent to the hearings, then we'll be able to have a little bit better picture as to what that number is. But I think that's a good start, a good faith estimate, the best I can make at this time of the year. Looking at this, the average single-family home at this time, the average assessment overall is probably close to $175,000. That's and then trying to find an average tax bill is what you would have. $2264 with the tax rate. We're looking at a $3,962 tax bill. Now, after or post revaluation, if that property is assessed at $279, about the average there, you're looking at about the same amount of taxes. I just tried to give this for a calculation so folks could have something to kind of relate to. Now, this is the heavy-duty statistic, I guess, of the night, or one of them. This is actually a chart that I put together, a graph, if I could pass some of these here out. This shows the actual numbers of property tax changes that we have in town. Oh, thanks very much. Numbers of properties, actually, and how the overall property tax changes. Now, this won't add up to the exact number of properties that we have in town due to splits and new subdivisions and properties like that being added. So, and across the bottom is the percentage change. Oh, that's fine. This is a bar graph that illustrates the numbers of properties and the relationship to how their property taxes are actually going to change as a result of this program. Now, we have one property that's taxes are actually going to drop 80%. And you can see as we get close to zero change, the core, the high number of our properties is actually included in that. It's actually 46% of the properties in town are going to have their property taxes change, somewhere between a reduction by 0 to 10% and an increase of 0 to 10%. Approximately 1,006 properties will see their taxes decrease between 0 to 10%, and 932 will see it increase. That's fine. That breaks down to 44% of the properties in town are going to see their properties taxes go down. And 56% are going to see an increase. Now, the median increase is going to be approximately 14.48%, which is close to the middle, but the average change is going to be an increase of 23.6%. I'd be happy to. The median increase in taxes is approximately 14.48, or you can say 14.5%, while the average is actually 23.6%. The average. And that takes, but I think the 14.5% effectively is really the strongest core representative. Yeah, your mean. Yeah. 23.6. And are going to go up, or that amount of percentage change. Now that takes into account that approximately 212 properties are going to see their property taxes increase by more than 100%. All the way to the right, yeah. Well, there's some that kind of get skewed by that. There's some line properties that are on the South Portland Cape Elizabeth line that were assessed at like $600 and are going up to say like $3,000, but there's just like a corner portion of their property. So it's, that kind of gives you yeah, exactly. The front yards in Cape and the backyards in South Portland. So things like that kind of go in there, and they'll show like, you know, a 400% increase. But
Does that 212 homes include the lots that didn't have houses last year and now have
no.
houses this year?
Actually, that may, actually on some of them in Cross Hill, where we went from a land value and now had a sale of
And
an
it also
home.
includes bringing into this all the renovations,
Exactly.
the add-ons. So it's not the number that would first appear to be, because an awful lot of them were the result of changes in the property and an increased valuation. If you look at the budget sheet, we would have had an increase like 20 million in valuation anyway, even without the reval. That's where a lot of that's been coming up.
So what you're saying is it's the same set of properties before and after, but it's really not the same set of buildings.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not exactly the same, and it's the same set of properties that were analyzed, but it's not the same buildings that they were prior to this analysis was completed, where there was significant renovations, additions, or new buildings added to the lot, and that is included in that, and that does make up a portion of the increase. A chunk of that 56% are people who built homes. Yeah. So that would be going from, say, a $60,000 lot to a $450,000 property, effectively. That is, thanks for reminding me about that, Michael. Now, as far as the decrease goes, I'm sorry, sure.
This 44% having taxes go down and 56% having taxes go up, that, again, including the budget change.
Including the budget change.
That we made an assumption for. Do you know what those numbers are? If there's any sort of net of the budget change?
Minus the 75,000 that you took out tonight, or?
No, just minus what the assumptions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what I did was I used.
I'm trying to compare apples
Yeah.
to apples and figure out what the impact of the reval as opposed to the reval plus the tax.
Okay, sure. Yeah, what I actually employed was the 2264 current tax rate, and then I used the $14.20 forecasted tax rate. So that would be.
So that includes the budget.
That includes the budget change.
So you don't have to pay it for without.
No, I could possibly do that. What I'd have to do is look at 2330, I think, estimated tax rate that would have, without the revaluation.
No, I was just wondering, because there's so many in the middle, even some little change may throw some on the other side.
Yeah, there's a lot that are clustered between, like, when I was looking at those numbers preparing for this, they're like between like 4%. There's a ton right in that range. Plus or minus 2, yeah, 2 up or 2 down, and it's right in that zone.
But the point is that the great majority in the middle aren't going to see much of a change, but there will be some significant impact.
On both ends, yeah, on the outliers.
What percent did you say were between, I'm sorry?
Oh, that's fine. I'm more than happy. There are a lot of numbers.
What percent of problems did you say were between the plus and minus 10%?
46%. Yep. Yeah, that's 1,938 properties are right in that ballpark there, and that's the core. It's 46%. That's not a bad result from this program overall. Now, as far as the decrease numbers go, in that 44%, the median decrease in taxes is going to be approximately 8.75%, or 8.75%. And let's see.
When the taxpayer get these
Actually, when we are sending out our notification letter, it's going to show what the new land value, the new building value, the new total assessed value, the estimated tax rate, and the estimated taxes. And that's a little bit different than what other communities have employed in implementing their revaluations in the area. A lot of towns just send out what your new value is going to be. And subsequently, I think that's what brings a lot of folks in to see you, in to see me. What the estimated tax amount is, and kind of gives a broad brush strokes as to what we actually performed. But I think by giving folks a bottom line number as to what they can kind of estimate by, our best estimate at this point in time, they can now look at the tax bill that they just paid and see, well, yeah, my tax bill last year was $3,000. This year it's going to be $3,100 or $2,800, and they can then say, well, overall, yeah, that's probably they're a lot more comfortable when they look at those numbers as opposed to seeing, my assessment went from 150 to 300,000, and now I think that the tax rate's 2264. My taxes just doubled, so I wanted to try to bridge that gap and let them know that what the net impact is going to be on this end. No, thanks for asking. Now, what is new? What have we kind of upgraded and done through the result of this program? We have upgraded our assessment software. Primarily now it's Windows-based, and it also made the data entry a lot faster. The staff, with the new assessment software that we received from NDS, or that we purchased from NDS to do this revaluation, it increased their productivity probably by 50% as far as entering the data. And that was a very nice, I knew it was going to increase our productivity some, but I didn't know that they were going to pick it up as well as they did or as fast as they did. So as we brought cards back in from the field, we had a turnaround time of less than a week, which before I think we were probably looking at 2 to 3 weeks. So if we got the data, as soon as we got it back in, they were punching it in. And that was a nice benefit by doing that. We also have the capability now for digital photos, of which we pretty much have taken just about all properties in town. I still have a number to load in because there are other tasks to try to do to wrap this up, and photos kind of are important, but numbers are much more important, and we have a lot of hard photos. But we have now loaded the majority of them in, and it saved us a fortune as far as doing this process, where we didn't have to go and chase cameras, chase film, develop, do all that, as well as have problems or bad shots that we could immediately delete instead of going to CVS and getting them back and having to take care of it. So that saved us quite a bit of money. We'll eventually expand our internet access. Right now we have what I consider a very good system, but limited in comparison to some other communities. South Portland has photos, and Portland has photos and sketches and yada, yada, yada. But we will now be able to eventually take our photographs and put them online. We're working towards getting that, and I can see that probably taking place within the year. Yes, Ann?
And will that be available? I know now you can get up the assessment database or whatever you call numbers. So will that all photos and all that stuff be available online to the average person, or is it?
I think we should be able to do that within the year. We're looking to get this virtual clerk, which the salesman for NDS indicates to me that we'll be able to link our photographs to that. So when a person calls up the assessment record, they'll also be able to see a photograph. And that answers about half of some of the questions that we have. And so folks will be able to see what they're looking at and where they may be going, a realtor, appraiser, insurance agent, or neighbor, and see if that's the property that they want to be referring to. And but we're working towards getting that capability. It'll cut down hopefully on some of our office visits, but it'll be better for customer relations as well as getting a lot of folks up to speed before they come in, and we can serve them more efficiently. In addition to this, I made some pretty significant changes to our database with the revaluation. A lot of our land was priced on a front foot in depth, which is kind of an archaic method that ends up leading sometimes to disproportionately high values or values that are not representative of market value for different properties, and we switched from that to a acre and square or percentage of acre format, where if you had a 20,200 square foot lot, effectively you had a half an acre, and you would put that in. And now next time we do one of these, we'll be able to update, I think, a little bit easier, because we can go in, and I had to create tables all over in their entirety, which I knew I had to upgrade, but getting into this process, realizing that I had to go in and now reload all the site sizes and create a new table for that, made it a little bit more difficult to upgrade. But the next time we do this, we'll just be able to change the tables and implement them and bring properties up to market value a lot easier, or at least expeditiously. One other thing that I need to tell you about is that this also makes it so we are able to, with the new software, adjust exemptions at an easier than we could before, when it was a heck of a lot more manual operation or entry before. And this kind of brings us down to what's going on, or what happened in the legislature this spring with the changes to the main property resident homestead exemption. Now, I'm planning on putting an article in the Courier regarding this, but effectively the change that took place in Augusta with the Baldacci budget was that they adjusted the homestead exemption so that if your property is assessed at $125,000 or less, you will now be eligible for the full homestead exemption of $7,000. If your property is assessed at $125,001 up to $249,999, the exemption will be not $7,000 anymore. It will now be $5,000. And then if your property is in excess of $250,000, the exemption is now going to be worth $2,500. And that effectively impacts 95% of the properties in Cape Elizabeth. And that giant sucking sound is the sound of dollars being pulled out of our pocket. And it bothered me, but there wasn't a heck of a lot that any of us could do about it. I'm the president of the IAAO in the state of Maine chapter, and there wasn't a heck of a lot we could do about it. It was policy and it was budgetary, but ultimately, thinking about the folks here that I work for, I found it very hard to swallow. Ms. Berry. I'm glad you asked that. That was not jury-rigged with. Councilor Berry asked if the veterans exemption has been altered in any way, and that has not. That now actually, through the results of doing this revaluation, will now be reestablished at $5,000 for veterans. You need a DD-214, your discharge paper that shows the date of entry and separation, a copy of we can copy all of this right here, your license, as well as your birth certificate. And but we need to have it prior to April 1st. But if they give it to me now, we can put it in for 2004. I know that sounds like a long way away. There's a lot of things that go on between now and then, but I'm more than happy to receive them at any time of the year, not the last week of March. I'm happy to take them now, and I'll file them and keep them for next year. So, Michael.
On the exemption, if you had to pay a $5,000 exemption and it was based on a $22 tax rate, you got a $110 credit. If you have a $5,000 exemption and it's based on a $14 tax rate, it is only
$71.
$71. So it's, by all of the exemptions are worth less because of the tax rate being much lower. Plus, we have the added impact of the changes in the homestead exemption law.
Yeah, effectively about $30 to the majority of our properties in town in a loss from that exemption. And we have very high participation in homestead in this town. That's something that I try to work hard on getting people to get it, and every time I get the opportunity to talk to somebody, I say, I'd make sure we check it, see if they're taking advantage of it. Now, this is kind of the schedule that we've been following under officially for the past year. April 1st of last year is when we really started the canvassing of the town, and that continued through the end of February. And at that same time, we performed additional analysis and the entry of all the data. From May of last year to the end of March this year, we did a number of proofreading or selective proofreading of all the data, and as well as analysis of sales and different land values. Now we're looking to set these values on May 1st and mail the notices shortly thereafter. We're having Northern Data Systems, our software vendor, do the direct mailing to the property owners because they can do it a heck of a lot more efficiently and more cost effective than I can get it done in our office. And then we will also, after that, through the month of May, have hearings where folks can come in and we can set aside a 15-minute block for them, and they can come in and they can actually come in at any time during working hours and review their record. That's available for them anytime. But if they have a direct issue that they would like to discuss, perhaps they have found an error in their record, or they'd like to come in and review it, check it for errors, and perhaps present you with evidence that states or proves or helps support an argument to me that their assessment is less or should be less than what it currently is, then that's the time period for them to take, or that's probably the earliest time period by which they can take advantage of that process. After that, we will be going to commitment the 1st of August, is when we actually set the tax rolls, and I'll commit the tax rolls to the tax collector. Now, by then, or after the commitment, then property owners who actually are still in disagreement with their assessed value that I've arrived at do have the opportunity for a formal appeal, and they can make an application for abatement and supply at that time additional information and support for their reasoning as to why their assessment is too high and not their property taxes, because we are talking about two different entities here where I'm the assessor and I must deal with values and not taxes. Now, somebody comes in and believes that their taxes are too high, but the value is right on the money. Well, there's not a heck of a lot I can do about that. Really, that part's out of my hands. But if their value, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and with 4,250 more or less records, there will be an error or two, and we have that contingency set in there. So I'm not above an error or two myself, so we can, and I'm more than happy to correct it when I am wrong and correct the record where it exists. So I always remember the lesson I heard originally when I started in this crazy business was, we're appointed and not anointed. So I try to keep that in mind.
Following that point, the allowance in calculating the tax rate that we have is a 3% allowance. The tax rate is based on a estimate of 1420, is based on a total assessed value that's 3% less than the immediate imputed value that matches the money.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, that's the in the overlay, and that's what that was specifically set in for. Let's see. Oh, sure. Sorry, Jack.
How before the evaluation last year, and they talked about redoing it again because the property is off balance already. Will we be taking the same thing?
It's hard to tell when our time period for facing one of these again is going to be. Many times you look at that, and as we saw earlier, that spike market in 2002, where properties, the average and the median went up about 35%. If I rolled out one of these last year, and I saw a number like that come in, and not knowing, if the sky was the limit or what was going to happen, probably be looking at that seriously. But at the same time, I think it may just be a spike, and I'd rather give it some time to see where it goes. I think 9 years between revaluations is too long. I think that's why we're going to see these why we see these swings that are going to take place where, your waterfront properties end up being assessed at a third of what they're worth, and your inland properties are close to, conservative growth, and they shoulder more of the burden. So I think maybe one thing we may want to look at is when we see pockets that have pulled away from the overall, maybe go in and doing a correction in that section. But I'd like to get through this part first. but I do think that I'd like to see more than a one-year trend before I threw the baby out with the bathwater, for lack of a better expression. Sure. Thanks for asking. Let's see.
If someone wants to compare their property with other people's property, how would they go about doing that? I mean, what would be the computer? Did they look at home or the internet? What did they actually, how do they go about comparing?
The question is, how would a property owner go about comparing their values to comparable properties? On Friday, we're actually going to have the new numbers on the computer, on the website, so they can actually look there and look in their neighborhood or look at, up and down their street to see what their assessed values are and try to make some comparisons at that point. We're getting that out before we actually send the letters, just because we want people to be able to get this information the sooner the better. And we've actually, they can look at that and see how they sit in relationship. Now, we've also done something different to the website and this function of the website that was heretofore not available, and that's directly linking the sales price to the assessment. So if that property sold, it says, there's a little red highlight above it that says, click here to see if there are any recent transfers of this property or the most recent selling price of this property. And I asked Wendy Derzewick, who's positively brilliant with the website, what she thought and any ideas she could have as far as doing this, and she came up with this solution. And the problem that I've had in the past is that the way we do extract sales information from Northern Data Systems ends up giving us the oldest sale. So I could have bought a house in Brentwood and paid $150,000 for it, and you might have sold it to me, but you bought it back in 1995. Well, for some reason or another, the way it extracts that from our database, it'll show me that 95 sale, but it won't show me that most recent sale. So what we try to do is remedy that by having that link so they can go to the sales information that I give every month to Wendy. So now they look at that map, block, and lot number and linked it right to that sales information that we have on that spreadsheet. So they can see that right there. So then they can see, oh yeah, well it actually sold for this and it's assessed at this now. Okay, I'm a lot more comfortable with that. So they can look at sales as well as comparable surrounding properties online. So we're looking to roll that out for Friday.
Is there any way they can look at if their house is $350,000, they can look at all the $350,000 houses or all the two-acre lots so that they can really...
We don't do the search by that, but at the same time it's difficult to say all the 2-acre lots because of locational differences. In this process, I broke the town down into 15 different distinct neighborhoods by the geography of the community and the sales in the neighborhoods that they had, and made determinations from the sale prices as to what we needed to have for values in that area as far as what the sales indicated to me the most probable selling price would be. It's better to compare your neighborhood as well as look at other components such as if I lived on the waterfront, I'd have a hard time comparing myself to somebody who lived on Ocean House Road, non-waterfront property. So that's why I wanted to compare apples and apples. That's what I've tried to do. Pardon? Oh, sure, sorry. Let's see. And then finally, I'd like to take the opportunity to bring special note to a few folks who really, without their help, this would have been impossible. And they made great strides and did perform yeoman's work on this. And that's Lori Palanza, our office manager. And she's done a great job kind of marshaling the troops, if you will, and giving me reports as to how the workflow is proceeding. Hiromi Dolliver, Barbara Lanson, and Lois Morrill are our regular support staff in the office, and they've done fantastic work as far as entering this data. And Bob Tripp, who I had worked for me for the better part of 75% of this, doing some listing. And was sorry to see him go, but he ended up becoming the assessor in Wyndham, so I'm happy for that. But he did a lot of great work, and it was great to have a colleague who helped me out as far as a lot of questions and bouncing some ideas and trying to make sure that I wasn't completely crazy with some of the decisions that I made. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of them for that work, especially in recognizing them from the council. And I think that's pretty much all I have. Thank you very much.
So Matt, on behalf of the council as a whole, I'm sure we all want to thank you very much, and your staff, for a considerable amount of time that has gone into this process, not just for this presentation tonight, but for over the past 2 or 3 years you've been working on this. And I'm sure that when the notices go out and people have questions, if they need to come into the office, they're going to be more than pleased with the way that you will be dealing with them. I've heard nothing but good reports from everybody that says that they've had to come into the office, that you're a great person to work with, and the town is very fortunate. So thank you. And so also, while we're here, I'm going to just notify people that earlier the council met as the Finance Committee to finalize budget figures, numbers, etc. And immediately following Matt closing down his operation, we are going to convene as the council to put to the May 12th meeting all of the items for the budget for the upcoming year. So we'll take 2 or 3 seconds. We'll go up to the podium, and since we are here, the cameras are rolling. We will keep them rolling so that the public can see where we are in the budget process at this point. So if the council would join me up front, we'll have a very brief special meeting. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's meeting is a special meeting that was continued from Monday, and I would ask for a roll call by the town clerk, if we could.
Chairman Roberts.
Present.
Councilor Berry.
Here.
Councilor Carson.
Here?
Councilor Fritz. Here. Councilor Lynch. Here. Councilor McGinty.
Here.
Councilor Swift-Kayada. Here. Manager McGovern.
And Town Clerk Coy.
Here.
All right. We have a pledge of allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening's meeting is slightly different than our normal format. No citizens' discussion or council items on the agenda. We will be taking recommendations from the Finance Committee and to put those on to the May 12 meeting. And the reports will be coming from Councilor Lynch for the evening. Councilor McGinty did ask if we could take item 106 out of order, but so all motions are as recommended by the Finance Committee on April 28, April 30. And Mary Ann, would you like to say anything at all?
Yes, I would, please.
All right.
I just wanted to take a minute to go over the budget and thank a number of people that ought to have some thanks. The Finance Committee of the Town Council has met 7 times since the beginning of January to work on the 03-04 budget. We've met with every department head and school board and school department in the preparation of these budgets. We're pleased to report to the council tonight a budget that is responsive to the needs of the community and a budget that is fiscally sound. The school board and the school department deserve special recognition for proposing a budget which results in minimal tax increase. This is no small effort considering the numerous mandates from Augusta and Washington. So we want to thank them for their efforts in developing a budget which is both fiscally and educationally sound and was adopted unanimously by the council in workshop without cuts. We also want to thank the town department heads and town employees for their contributions to the budget process. Given the increase in employee benefit costs and fuel costs, we recognize that it was a challenge also to them to continue to provide the public safety, public works, and community services which people in Cape Elizabeth have come to expect. Finally, we'd like to thank the many volunteers in this town. I hesitate to list them all for fear of omitting some, but from fire and rescue to the gift shop at Fort Williams and volunteers in our schools, our town continues to reap the benefits of so many generous volunteers. And so to them, as we present this budget, we'd just like to say thank you. As a result of the efforts of all of these people, we're presenting a budget tonight with a tax increase of 2.4%. And I would like to just briefly go over the numbers, but just by category. For town services, we are presenting a budget of $7,335,088. The county assessment, which is set by the county and over which we have no responsibility, is $814,655. And I ought to add for the public, that's a almost 7%, 6.74% increase by the county. So again, it was a challenge for the town to come in with a budget at 2.4% when our county expenditure went up again considerably in excess of the things that we do here locally. The school department's budget is $15,315,320 for a net to taxes increase of 2.3%. And again, I really want to thank the school board and the school department for their efforts. And the community services budget is $864,137 for a total of town and school, county, and community services next year, starting July 1, 2003, of $24,330,000. And with that, if there's anything that anyone else would like to add, I will just start to move the budget item.
Again, Councilor McGinty had asked if we could take item 106 out of order, and as a single item, and then we could do the balance as a block. And unless I see some objections from somebody, why don't we do that?
That's fine.
All right?
Okay.
Yeah, I would also like a roll call vote on that item, specifically on that item,
The first item.
the first item. And we can take the rest of them en bloc. No, that's fine.
Are we going to do the first item right away?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, I will move receipt of the report of the Finance Committee on the proposed fiscal year 2004 general fund budget and to set a public hearing on Monday, May 12, 2003 at 7:30 at the Town Hall. Do I...
And you need
Okay, and to set for a public hearing on Monday, May 12th, the recommended fiscal year budget with expenditures of $24,330,000 and revenues of $6,641,724, and with net to taxation revenues of $17,688,276.
$17 million.
$17 million. I'm sorry. What did I say?
Thousand.
Okay.
What's the
That'd be great.
That's a material.
Decimal point.
That's a material error. You state that. $17,688,276 for an estimated tax rate increase of 2.4%.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Discussion.
I'd also like to thank the school board. I'm sorry I missed the meeting on Monday, but I know they did a great job. Actually, it's 2 years in a row they've done a great job, and I appreciate that. And I do, I think they did to keep it to where it is. They did a really great job.
All right, I will call for a roll call vote then.
Councilor Berry?
Yes.
Councilor Carson?
Yes.
Councilor Frith?
Yes.
Councilor Lynch?
Yes.
Councilor McGinty?
No.
Councilor Swift-Kayada?
Yes.
And Chairman Roberts.
Yes.
That is a 6 yes, 1 nay vote. Councilor McGinty.
Item number 107-0203 through number...
Before we leave that item, could I make a comment on that item 106?
All right, sir.
Very late in the last week or so, the auditors discovered that there was a part of our budget that we had counted on that came as a surprise. And I can understand Councilor McGinney's thinking on this thing, but I think that we have to move ahead with the budget, and I can sympathize with his position, but I think that we have to pay the bills for the town, and I just wanted to say that his heart's in the right place, but I think we got to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Henry. So, items 107-0203 through item 113-0203. I have a motion to accept, and we can read them by title, each of them, when we make the motion, if we would, so that people will know what we're voting on.
I will move adoption of items 107-02-03 through...
Excuse me. The term adoption, I think receipt of the report from the Finance Committee would be...
Thank you. I'm new at this still. I move receipt of the report of the Finance Committee on items 107-02-03 to item 113-0203, and also move to set for public hearing those items, and then I will name them by title.
Yes.
And it would be receipt of the proposed sewer fund and budget, receipt of the Riverside Cemetery Fund and budget, receipt of the Spurwink Church Fund budget, receipt of the Fort Williams Capital Fund budget, receipt of the Thomas Jordan Fund budget, receipt of the Rescue Fund budget, receipt of the Museum at Portland Headlight Fund budget, and to set all of those for public hearing.
And I believe you would want to add public hearing on May 12th, 2003.
I'm sorry, May 12th.
7:30.
So amended.
The second motion.
Very good. Any further discussion from council? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor? You can show it to be unanimous. I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Show that to be unanimous. Right. The meeting is over. Thank you.